Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 19th, 2022 Operations Budget and Fiscal Affairs Committee meeting. My name is Dr. Kenneth Harris. I'm the chair of the committee and the representative for District 7. Thank you for joining us tonight. We've got a few guest board members here that I'd like to highlight, and thank you for joining us tonight. We've got board member Shayla Adams Stafford. We'll also be joined by board member Judy Mickens Murray, who may be dialed in, not yet, and also board member Dr. Zipporah Miller, and my co-chair, board member Lasaya Frazier is here, as well as Dr. Juanita Miller. With that, Ms. Barton, can you please take the roll for me?
Dr. Kenneth Harris,
Present.
board member Madeline Lasaya Frazier,
Present.
Dr. Juanita Miller,
Present.
Mr. David Murray. We have quorum.
All right. Let's move on to section 1.3, an adoption for the October 19th, 2022 meeting agenda. May I have a motion to adopt the meeting agenda for tonight? Any takers?
So moved.
Second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposed? All right, the agenda for tonight is approved. May I have a motion to approve the September 14th, 2022 meeting minutes?
So moved, Chair.
All right, I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposed? All right, the September 14th meeting minutes are approved. Section 1.4, moving on to section 2. Tonight, public comment. We have no public comment speakers for tonight, but just like to remind the public that you're always able to register to be a public comment speaker at this committee meeting or any committee meeting, as well as the full board meetings. So we move on to section 3 now. So section 3.1, we'll be discussing the FY 2024 operating budget community recommendation survey. This is an annual survey that we do just to hear from the community to find out what they'd like to see in the allocation of the budget for this upcoming year. So it was launched on September 15th, and then it closed on October 17th to increase the amount of responses that we have. Ms. Bird, you can go and project the slides for me when you're ready. I'm happy to say that we got close to 500 responses, which is pretty good across all of our districts. Go next slide for me. So we got just under 500 responses. So I'm happy to see that. And board members will see the delineation of their information following this meeting or close to the end of the week. I'll make sure to get that for you. So who participated in our survey? So it's similar to last year. We have a large portion of our constituents or our community that doesn't know which district they represent, but that doesn't stop them from participating in the actual survey. And then you'll see that all 9 districts are represented there, some more than others. But the largest slice is those folks that don't know where they where they fit into the puzzle. But all that is factored into what we came back with. Next slide for me. Okay, so it's also important to kind of address who we surveyed in this annual poll that we do. So the largest portion came from our parents and guardians of our students. We've got a small portion of our students participating, as well as residents and actually employees of the school system. And again, Mr. Herbstman and Ms. Howe's team, I'm able to provide more detailed information. This is just kind of high level how the survey went for the public's sake. Next slide for me. Okay, so the main takeaways here is that we boiled it down to 5 areas where our community wants to see the money allocated this year, and we'll have additional discussions with board members and then staff as the time approaches. So the top 5 areas are hiring teachers, hiring more educational support staff, upgrade technology, special education, and increase virtual learning. There's some other areas in there as far as transportation, retaining teachers, climate change action plans, things like that. But again, we have more detailed summaries. This is just an overall approach for the general public, and sharing it with my fellow committee members. But again, there is subsections of data for each board member that will be sharing with them. And I'll make sure that each of you board members have a copy of this for tonight. That's my last slide, Mia, so we can go ahead and close that out. Okay, I guess before I jump off of that, any questions from board members? I know I went through that really quick, but like I said, I'll get you a copy of it. Okay, hearing none, I'm going to move right on to one of the men of the hour here, Dr. Mark Fawcett, for section 3.2, dealing with operations movement and transportation updates. So Dr. Fawcett, our Chief Operating Officer, I will yield the floor to you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Well, good evening, Committee Chair Harris and the other board members who are present, as well as the general public. At our last OBAFA meeting, the board expressed interest in kind of us giving some updates and kind of dissecting the issues that we're having with our transportation in terms of on-time delivery of our students. And what we agreed to do was have transportation come to this meeting to provide some updates and some current solutions and challenges that we continue to have in this national shortage of bus drivers. The one thing that I can say, and I repeatedly try to remind the public, is that, you know, although we're approximately 200 bus drivers short, is that we still do our best to get the kids, number one, to school safely, and number two, on time. We have not canceled any bus routes this year. However, we do know that on those uncovered routes, that buses will be delayed as our buses double back and pick up 2 routes at one time. So we do realize that there are delays in routes, but we have canceled no routes. And I just kind of wanted to start off, you know, giving that carrot to transportation, because the transportation personnel we do have, and especially the bus drivers who are currently working for us, they work very hard every day and they go above and beyond. So, you know, sometimes I know we get frustrated that they're late, but please, it's not the bus drivers that we have currently on staff. Those are the ones we should be thanking, because if they weren't working for us right now, we'd be that much more in the hole. So we appreciate your deference. And I have Dr. Rudolph Saunders here with me tonight, who's the Director of Transportation, and he's going to give a brief presentation on some of the challenges and some of the solutions that we've come up with to provide service to our students. Dr. Saunders.
Thank you, Dr. Fawcett, and thank you everyone for being a part of this presentation this evening. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible, but also hopefully be informative to some of the concerns that have come up most frequently and most recently. I know we had some slides. I don't know if you're controlling that remotely. Thank you. So we start off with what are the things that have affected us being able to be efficient. And of course, we define being efficient by being on time and safe every day, both to school, coming home from school, and also being able to offer the services that people ask, such as, you know, we provide transportation for field trips, athletic events, kids that are in half-day programs that maybe need to go to another campus, etc. And obviously, in doing that, we have to have a number of bus drivers. Being a bus driver, and I've been in the school system now for 30 years, and I have to say, this is probably one of the most challenging positions in the school system, not just in terms of what they're doing in driving the vehicle, but in maintaining the credentials they need to do that. You know, maintaining a CDL, making sure that they've done everything as far as updating their physicals, keeping their driving record intact, and etc. So, you know, we work hard with our individuals to make sure that we support them as much as possible in doing that. So as you see here, as of the beginning of this week, we still have currently 222 open, unassigned, or uncovered routes. And what that means is the routes that we developed back in the summer to take kids to the various schools, we have drivers that bid for those routes. And there are 222 routes that right now don't have anyone assigned. Now, I want to emphasize that does not include people who might just be absent because they're sick today, or things that naturally happen to people. And we always estimate that between 5 to 8% at any given time of your workforce is going to be absent organically for reasons that are usually legitimate. But that right now does not include the 222 routes. As Dr. Fawcett stated, we make sure that we cover those routes with a driver from another route. We utilize the people who are in the offices, et cetera, to cover that, but that impacts our ability to drive the routes as we planned them. The bus leaving a school, leaving in the morning from the bus route to go to at least 3 different schools in many cases, sometimes more, is dependent upon being able to do that on time and go straight from the first school to the second to the third. And obviously when they're having to cover other things in between, there's a ripple effect of how we're able to transport to the other schools. We also have an increased number of specialty programs. So I'm sure everyone is familiar with the numbers of great programs that we offer academically for our students throughout the county. Many are outside of the boundary area for where our students live, and in providing transportation for students to go into another area, sometimes cross county, that presents a challenge because those are longer rides, and then that also impacts their ability to help cover something else. Our special needs students, particularly those that are part of non-public schools. So if you're not aware, many of the non-public programs are outside of Prince George's County boundaries. We send buses every day into Anne Arundel. We go as far as Baltimore, Frederick County, we're into Washington, D.C., and even in Virginia some days. So as those numbers of students in those programs increase, the need to create more buses and more routes increase, and that just adds to the number of uncovered routes. And then the lack of substitute drivers. We have positions set aside so that we could have individuals to help cover those routes, but until we fill the existing routes that we have, we aren't able to set people aside to serve as just substitutes. So when we have drivers that are absent for any reason, we're forced to use other people who have finished their route, maybe people who are in the office, like the foreman and assistant foreman, our driver trainers, et cetera, who all still have a commercial driver's license, and they assist us by jumping in and help to cover those routes as much as possible. It also impacts, sometimes people have said, well, I've tried to call the bus lot, we're trying to talk to somebody about this, and many times they're not available because every available person is out driving, because our first priority is to make sure we get those kids out of the neighborhood or home from the school, as opposed to anything else that we're already late for. If I can move to the next slide. So some of the strategies in covering that. As Dr. Fawcett said, we never just say, well, we don't have a driver, so we aren't going to pick this neighborhood up or these kids up. Obviously, drivers usually have to defer first to their assigned route or their assigned group of kids, but then it is not uncommon that they might leave the school and go back in the neighborhood and pick up another group that maybe is still waiting for their bus because we know we're short that day or we don't have a driver. Oftentimes at the end of the day, drivers will either kind of double up, and if there's room on the bus, allow some other students that should be on a different route to get on that bus, as long as we don't overfill it and create a dangerous situation. Or they'll just take all those kids home, come back and pick up another group. It can obviously impact maybe the next school they're supposed to pick up, but again, the priority is to get every group home. I know we've had that question come up a few times where people have said, well, we don't have a bus or the bus doesn't pick our kids up. It can make them to be very transparent, very late. Sometimes, by the time they've done that for a few different schools through the course of the morning or afternoon, they could now be running 30, 45 minutes late. And sometimes it understandably can give the impression that a bus is not coming or there is no bus today. And that's usually not the case. And I'll talk about the communication on that in just a minute. We try to fill those positions, obviously, to create opportunities for more people to join us. So we have job fairs at least bi-weekly where individuals have an opportunity, if they have their credentials, commercial driver's license, and or what they need for a commercial driver's license, a clean driving record, clean criminal record, ability to pass the written test. We do, the drug screening, et cetera, but we will offer those people positions right there on the spot at the job fair. If they don't have everything they need as far as a license, we do offer CDL training. And in a lot of places, that's something people have to pay to go to school so they can get the commercial driver's license. We not only provide that for free, but we actually pay them while they're in training. So we have trainers that will assist them through the classroom part to get their learner's permit, to learn the rules of the road, etc. And then we have one of our driver trainers work with them on a bus on our practice course so that we can get them ready to go to the Department of Motor Vehicles, take the test, pass it, be issued their CDL, and we put them driving as quickly as possible after that. We've started to do a variety of times for those classes so that it's not all during the day. We try to do some maybe in the afternoon. We've even talked with individuals about maybe doing evening classes to assist them with more opportunities while they're still doing the things they're doing, in some cases another job or whatever the case may be. And then, as I talked about before, we try to combine or cover runs when necessary. It's challenging. Our foremen do a phenomenal job of being creative in how to cover the existing routes with the people that we do have and figure out who can help us by picking up another group of kids, etc. This year, we've done some things to enhance the financial incentive for those drivers who help us in that way, so that those drivers who are already working hard at taking their group of kids home, we can give them some type of financial incentive to show our appreciation as they assist us by staying a little late, driving a little further, and doing a little more to help us make sure that all of our kids get to and from school. If I can go to the next. So one of the pieces that comes up is communication. So I think everyone by now has at least heard of, if not used, the Stop Finder app. That is an app that parents are able to download to their telephone. It allows them to monitor, much as if you've used Uber or Lyft, to get the status of the bus and get an idea of how far the bus is away. This first link, and I don't know if we're able to go live on this on the screen, whoever's moderating, I don't know if it's live or went great. So the name of the company is TransFinder that produces it. And we also, at the beginning of the year, had parents go into InfoFinder. It's similar to this, but that is a program that you could go web-based, put your address in, and it would show you all the existing bus stops in your immediate neighborhood before you may be assigned the bus you're actually going to be riding, but you can at least see what the other stops are and what time we plan to be there. But Stop Finder is assigned to your actual student. So once we've assigned that to the student, they're able to go on and get this information. If you can kind of scroll down this a little bit on the screen. These are the things that once this is all set up and running, the information that parents would be able to get. You'll notice they talk about geo alerts, which is really just an electronic fence around the area, whether it's your home or the school. And that way, when the bus enters that area, and I'll talk a little bit about what has to happen for that to be accurate. But when the bus enters that area, it will send a signal to the person who set the app up to know the bus is close. It's 5 minutes away. People can set that zone based on a time or a distance to know how far away are we from the bus. So the child may not have to wait outside, but they may be able to time and say, okay, the bus is within a half mile. Now's a good time to head outside to the stop. So that is the ideal behind being able to do that. It also allows parents at work to maybe be able to monitor that and assist their child with that. But again, when the bus is late, I know that's when it gets challenging because they don't know sometimes. When I came here, I don't see a bus. Does that mean I missed the bus or it hasn't come yet? And that's one of the pieces that we hope that would happen. And if you could scroll, I think there's one more little part to this if you go a little further. Thank you. And that gives you an idea of what some of that interface looks like, you know. And again, it's based on your child. You would see there the actual route number or bus number that is assigned to the child in doing that. The app is free of charge. They would go to the Google Play or Apple Store, download the app, and then the parent would go in through SchoolMax, that put their email address that they want to be used, you know, the one that their personal email, work email, whatever the case may be. And that sends us a signal to forward to TransFinder. That sends the parent the credentials to log onto the app, because for security purposes, we don't just want anybody to be able to log on and track a child. Obviously, you know, it would be an unsafe situation. Okay. If we can go back to the main. Thank you. the third slide. Thank you. So when people say, well, I've tried to use the app and it doesn't work, or I'm having problems, the things that have to happen, one is it depends on the driver being on the bus that is assigned for that route, because every bus has a GPS device that is hardwired to the bus. We assign that bus that it was assigned to the route to what's in the computer. So in other words, if the bus that is supposed to be doing that route is doing something other than that route, the app has no way of knowing that. So we need the regular driver to be on the regularly assigned bus for that to flow into the app. And because we're short, there are many times that's not the case. When it does not happen, we try to have drivers use the substitution app, which is Wayfinder. We have found there to be many challenges in doing that. One, because oftentimes they aren't just subbing for the route, they're splitting the route sometimes, because you may have two drivers that say, I can't take all of them. This driver will take half, the other won't take the other half. Or they may have combined routes, and we just haven't quite perfected the way to do that so that it accurately reflects. So that is a very frustrating challenge for schools and for parents to know where, I'm trying to find my bus, where is it? It may show the bus still sitting at the bus yard, because the actual bus that was assigned may not have a driver yet. That route may not have a driver, so it's still sitting and someone else is picking that group of kids up, but they are going to pick the students up. And then of course, parents have to register for their access through SchoolMax. Most times in the beginning of the year, that's the challenge, but I think by now, a great majority of our parents who are interested in utilizing this have done that. So hopefully everybody has at least received the credentials to access that, even if it's not flowing with the other pieces. And then the other thing we try to do as far as communication is our department sends a letter to the schools, which lets them know the routes which are currently open. It's never perfect because it changes every day, but it lets them know if we have a route that as of whatever point we're in of the year, no one has been assigned to yet, or we haven't been successful in securing a driver for, it gives them an idea that that route is likely to be late or have to be covered on a regular basis. So they can at least get some idea. And by now our principals have been really creative in knowing, hey, I've got this one group of buses, it might be 3 or 4 at a particular school that I know every day are going to have to be covered. It might not be covered the same way, but they know that those buses are likely to be late in the morning and the afternoon. So hopefully they have shared that with the community. We've asked them to help us to spread that word to make sure those parents are aware that their bus currently may not have a permanent driver, and to please be patient while we work towards securing some. And the last piece for anybody that I don't know exactly at what point, I think in the last few years, one of the many suggestions that came out of the transportation task force and some of the other ideas was partnering with Metro, with WMATA. And we tried to look at doing that. WMATA was very open to working with us, but one of the things we found is that the WMATA routes in Prince George's County are designed primarily to get people from the county into work, into the District of Columbia. There weren't very many routes that were designed from neighborhoods to go to the local school or in the time that was necessary. So we didn't find a lot of routes that would take care of that. They're open to anybody, and we've asked the community, if you know of routes for a particular area that would help do that, they certainly are willing to offer that, and we make arrangements to do that. The one exception to that we did find was a number of routes at High Point High School. So we used that as a pilot during the last year to allow those families that wanted to utilize the Metro routes to go to school and to go home an opportunity to do that. I think for some of them it did work, but for many, the timing that it took, because again, the school time that they needed to be there versus the time of that route in many cases meant they had to be there a lot earlier. WMATA was not willing or able to modify the routes just to meet our times, but we did work as closely as possible to do an overlay of their routing map with ours to find cases where that would happen. Unfortunately, there weren't very many, and we're still looking and working as time goes forward. I know in the future, as we maybe build new schools or change boundaries, we may find that there are more routes that will benefit from this, and we're still open to it. But right now, that has not been a long-term solution to fix the big scale problem, which is again, the shortage of drivers. And I think that wraps up the slides, and I hope that answered most of the questions that were initially before.
Definitely. So Dr. Saunders, thanks so much for taking the time out to come and present to this committee tonight. Mia, I think we might have, I see at least one hand up. I don't know if we want to keep the slides up just as we kind of field questions here, but I'd like to open the floor up to my colleagues to ask questions on this topic. So I'll start with Board Member Adam Spafford, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Sanders, for that presentation. I'll just start by saying that 222, you said 222 routes that are unassigned. That's, extremely troubling. If we can go back to that slide, this is probably the biggest challenge that I'm facing in my district with my constituents. I have several questions here, and I'll start with the first question around special needs students. So are those routes covered by PGCPS bus drivers, or are those contracted out? That's my first question. My second question is the 222 unassigned or uncovered routes. How does that compare to neighboring jurisdictions? I know that this year pay was increased. I believe Dr. Fawcett mentioned this in a recent board meeting. Can you share with us how does our base pay compare to neighboring jurisdictions? I also wanted to inquire about some of the challenges around hiring. Last year, I held a job fair in an attempt to get people from my community to sign up to be bus drivers. And one of the challenges was around the clean criminal record. We have many returning citizens here in Prince George's County that, have paid their dues and perhaps had an issue, 20, 30 years ago, maybe as a juvenile. And they were commenting that our policy might be more strict than other locations. And so I wanted to know if you could talk to us a bit about that. And then if there's a second round, I have specific questions about the WMATA pilot.
Okay, so thank you for those questions. I'll try to touch on as many of that as possible. First of all, you are absolutely correct. That is a high number when we've got 222 open routes. And that's, we have a total of a little over 1,100 buses. So that means there's that number of buses that we aren't currently utilizing on a regular basis. We would certainly want to be able to utilize every available bus and every route, and that does interfere with that. You are also correct that we've done some recent salary enhancements. Dr. Goldson has pushed a lot of things forward as far as cost of living and step increases, et cetera, so that we could remain competitive. We are one of the few school districts in the state of Maryland where we actually employ all of our bus drivers. So there's us and 2 other counties where those bus drivers and attendants are our employees. The others do contract their routes out. So they use a series of contractors to try to fill the need. So it's hard to kind of compare that because obviously salaries might be a little different, but also they may not offer the same benefit package and the same perks that we're able to offer. As far as the background, that's the same as all school system employees. So I'm unaware of any special dispensation as far as changing anything, but that is a factor. When we have people come in, we check both their background for criminal records as well as driving records. Individuals cannot have more than 2 points on the driving license. And that means even once we hire them, whether it's done during the course of their day or even in their private vehicle on the weekends or evening, once they hit 3 points or more, they're up for review. And by state rules, we cannot have individuals who are riding with certain types of infractions that lead to that number of points. So that is a challenge. But I think we try to compensate for that, both with the salary and, as I talked about before, the perks as far as offering the training to get their CDLs and the other pieces to hopefully retain these individuals, to keep them on board with the things that we do offer with that. You mentioned the who drives who. So we do all of our transportation. We drive our comprehensive students, our special needs students, students who are in specialty programs, and we also provide students from a McKinney-Vento program, which are our students who are currently homeless. And that can include taking students from a great distance. You know, we have students that we may have to pick up every day because they are temporarily displaced and staying anywhere in the Virginia, DC, and Maryland area. So we are the ones that do that with our current fleet. We don't have any contracted runs at this point. We have looked at that previously as a possibility. And at that time, for various reasons, that option did not work, between a combination of cost and accessibility to have done that. And, you know, we could talk a little more about that at a later time if you want some more information on that. But right now, we, being Prince George's County Public Schools on transportation, are providing the transportation for all of those students. I hope that answers all of those points.
I mean, is that typical for a school system of our size to handle every single aspect of transportation? I mean, I've worked in other school districts where that hasn't been the case.
Every area does things a little different. In our area, the other large school district, obviously being Montgomery County, they do the same thing we do. Some of the other districts, while they may be a little smaller, have chosen to go through contracting routes. You know, I can't speak to how they got there, but it is typical that there are many large school districts that manage their own transportation and some that do not. It's a hard transition to move out of, because it means we also have invested in all the property that houses our buses. We purchase and lease all of our buses. So we own everything from the garages, the bus lots, the employees, and other people maybe have utilized that differently. So it'd be a hard switch probably to go from one to the other.
And let me just jump in, Dr. Saunders, because we have explored contracting as board member Adam Stafford, as Dr. Saunders reiterated. And I would want to reiterate once again that this is a national issue. It's the local jurisdictions, educational agencies around us who do contract are experiencing the same issues that we're experiencing. Maybe not as great a scale, but most of the other districts are a lot smaller. We have some neighboring districts that actually don't run buses for certain routes. And I'm not going to call any of those districts out, but we could definitely have some offline conversations. The transportation community in the state of Maryland is a very tight-knit community. As Dr. Saunders could probably tell you, the directors talk all the time, and you know, we have some jurisdictions once again who are solely used contractors and really have had to stop bus service, cancel bus service. If a driver happens to change jobs in the middle of the year, they'll actually stop that bus, period, and write a note to the parents and say, hey, look, we have no bus coverage. You got to get your child to school the best way you possibly can. We have not gotten to that point. Like I said, we attempt and we make sure that routes are covered in the most timely fashion we can. Are we late? Absolutely. Are we going to be late when we have 222 overruns? Absolutely. So the shortage of bus drivers and where it has increased to now, we've always had a shortage in this county since, when I say we've always had, especially at least for the last 10 years, we've always been short a certain amount of bus drivers, typically anywhere between 50 and 100. But we've never been short of the capacity we are now that it's become a nationwide problem. And I think, I'll be honest with you, people may not think we're doing a good job, but I know we're doing a good job in covering these routes. And it's typically, it's really because we've been faced with these challenges before. And you know, they're exacerbated. Yes, they are. You talked about our starting salary wage. We have always been somewhere in the middle. When you look at the jurisdictions that are around us who provide their own transportation. So I believe I don't want to quote a price Mike may have, Chief Hertzman may have, I'm sorry, may have the exact starting salary that we moved up to. I believe it's somewhere north of $20 an hour. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but if you look at our Human Resources Department have done some, more than one, comparable studies, and we fall smack dab in the middle of the Washington metropolitan area. So it's not that we're paying any less. We've increased it. We increased our substitute bus driver pay to try to attract people who may, who have CDLs, who may be willing and want to substitute, but we're doing the best we can. And we at least have two higher fares every month. As you know, certain rules for drivers are bound by COMAR rules and regulations in terms of those things, because I believe you mentioned some of our things that would disqualify bus drivers. We do operate under the standard COMAR, but there are other things, certain things that we will not, as you know, hire for if there have been certain, let's say, past criminal record that we just won't go past, and that's based on COMAR as well as just on what's safe for our children. So.
Thank you. I'm just, trying to process and trying to get a better understanding in terms of, typically just what are you all's goals around decreasing the amount of unassigned routes? Like when you're having these hiring fairs and you're doing this work, like, do you have like a plan for, by this date, we want to hire this many drivers, or we want to create like an internal pipeline of students that get their CDL license by the time they graduate? And I know that there are several programs that have partnered with the school district to get students CDL licenses in other industries. So just, what are some of your goals in order to reduce this number? And then if we could go to the WMATA slide, this most recent pilot, Chair Harris, myself, and others were, pushing for this pilot in the last school year. And this slide doesn't give much information on sort of what happened with the pilot. So for example, I would like to know, how many students participated, sort of what was the exact outcome in terms of, is this still going on? How many routes do overlap with existing stops? And, I'd even ask, if there could be some type of work group to work with WMATA to develop some type of hub system. I know that in other places, they develop specialized hubs, and we had a program with WMATA in the past. It was something that we had to pay for, but basically students, these were specialized routes that were created for communities. And I'm just trying to get a better grasp on sort of the outcome of this pilot and what can we do to have a broader conversation with WMATA about, supporting more schools.
Board member, Chair Harris, I'm going to ask that those questions be documented and sent to the appropriate personnel, such as Dr. Saunders. My understanding for tonight's meeting is we're supposed to get into budget items, and really we're getting off it appears we're getting off offline in terms of where this committee and what this committee is scheduled to do tonight. So those questions and concerns that board member Adam Stafford has raised, this meeting is being recorded. So if the notes have not been taken, I am suggesting that board member Adam Stafford put those comments in writing to those persons so that we can move this meeting forward, because we're really going off track, and what is being asked is not directly related to what the purpose of this committee tonight, and that is to get towards the budget season. Thank you.
So thank you for your comments, Dr. Miller. I'll allow Dr. Saunders and Dr. Fawcett to reply to Board Member Adam Stafford. It is within the what Dr. Fawcett and I discussed prior to this meeting was aspects of transportation. So whatever facts they might have concerning her questions right now, they're more than happy to, they're more than welcome to follow up on them.
But Dr.
during the
Fox
meeting.
indicated that he didn't have some of the information that she's
Right,
asking
right.
for.
Right,
That's
so
what I'm
so
interested in.
right, so if there's information that he does not have, we can follow up after the meeting. I'm perfectly all right with that, but I'm allowing him the floor to answer the questions now. If he doesn't have the answer, that's fine. But I'm still going to allow him the floor to respond to that in whatever way he does.
If I may speak to the WMATA piece, we definitely did an after action with respect to how the WMATA pilot went, so we can provide information around how many student attendees participated, what were some of the successes we saw through the pilot, what were some of the challenges, recommended next steps and lessons learned. So we can provide that information.
And Dr. like I said, we have provided some of that information in the past. I'd have to look back to see exactly when we did it, but we did identify the number of students who participated and so forth. The other thing I want to mention just very, very briefly is the fact that you may remember, I believe it was school year 1920. We actually had a transportation task force that was set up by Dr. Golson, which included WMATA, Ride On, many different, we had parents, we had transportation specialists, we had outside transportation advisors. So this is essentially not our first time to this rodeo and bringing in WMATA. We've done that in the past. We did it probably, I remember when I was principal, we did it back then because that is the pilot program that you were talking about. And we actually explored that, being able to do that again. I think I had one of those specialized routes that ran students because we were the school I was formerly at had a Metro bus stop right in front of the school. We were one of those routes that were created. And it was some sort of, because Metro was duly funded between state and local governments, the state had to participate, which they did at that time. And if I'm recalling correctly, Dr. Saunders, when we had a transportation task force back in 1920, when we attempted to do that again, that was the issue, is that state participation was not available to it. And that's the only way WMATA will modify and change those routes. And that's based on how WMATA is set up. But we've explored many of those things that you just talked about, and we can actually revisit them. We can give more information to the board, whatever they need. We welcome any ideas and possible solutions. This is not, and I reiterate, it's not a problem that is germane to Prince George's County. You pick up any publication, you pick up, there have been school systems in the United States of America who have completely shut down their transportation. Completely shut it down. And we're not going to get to that point. I think we do a great job. We recruit, our human resources team is highly talented, and we're not turning away people. Anybody we can hire, anybody that we can encourage, we're providing free training, not only for your learners for your CDL, we're providing paid training on both of those. We have programs that we're trying to put together where our bus aides can actually transition into bus drivers. So there are many things that we've attempted to do. There are many things behind the scenes that that we're doing. But the only way we solve this total conundrum is to have drivers for every route, and then to have a bench of substitute drivers. Because even if we had all our routes covered and we had no substitutes, when somebody's out, they take leave. We all do that in our jobs. And like Dr. Saunders said, we've done a study, 5 to 8% of school system employees take off on any given day. But when you talk about bus drivers, that's 5% of 1,100 drivers. You got to cover those routes. And those are challenges that we face each day and every day. And again, I'm not trying to tote toot our horn like, we're just solving the world's problem, but they are doing a great job in getting over 90,000 students, 90,000 to and from school every day as safely as possible and as on time as possible.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry. I just wanted to ask a quick clarifying question. Did you say the state has to change WMATA bus routes? Was that?
No, they part of the pay, because those routes are paid for, the state has to contribute. I can get you more information exactly. Have you ever had a chance to read the Transportation Task Force report that was done a couple of years ago?
Probably not.
Okay, so we can have some more conversation, but I'll get you specifically. Like I said, on that task force, we did have representatives of WMATA and Ride On, the county government. It was a little bit of everybody trying to help us in solving that problem. And as you know, there were certain recommendations that came from that task force.
So thank you, Dr. Fawcett, again, for your transparency on this. Like I said, during our offline meetings, I know this is not a one-size-fits-all solution. So we appreciate you welcoming people to the table as we work through this solution together. Board Member Mickens Murray, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Chair Harris, and I appreciate you allowing me to ask this question. To Dr. Saunders, I appreciate your response today to a situation with the transportation. So my question is this. I realize we have Stop Finder, but when we have students that go to their bus stop, wait for a couple of hours patiently for the bus to show up, how are we communicating it to parents that may or may not have this Stop Finder? And second, are you notifying the school itself? Because as a parent, I would think the parent will contact the school to see what is happening with the bus, where their child is and all of that. So, and if you need to answer in writing, I'm perfectly fine with that. So,
We may
thank
give you, and thank you. We may have to do some pieces in writing, but I will tell you, we have been working on improving ways so that the school is better aware of what's happening with the buses. They have an online module also, similar to the information that's in Stop Finder, called Viewfinder. It's how they get updated route information, so they know who should be on a bus and what the status of those routes, and so that the principals can track that. But like I said, the greatest challenge, and to just be honest, is people utilize that, and that is meant to assist, but it is not a perfect communication system. Because if the bus, and many times we're not using the bus we plan to use for that route. And if the foreman is there trying to cover multiple routes and he says, hey, Ms. Jones and Mr. Brown, will you go cover a route? It's hard to do that and update that to the school at the same time. They're just anxious to get a bus out there. So sometimes they're able to get that in the system so the school can follow, sometimes not. We do have a hotline for principals to call us who may want to say, hey, we dismissed 30 minutes ago and the following buses aren't here. At the first 30 days of school, there's a lot of that. And then it starts to get better as time goes on because the drivers, we hire more people, they become more familiar with the route, and it slows down. So it's a little easier for them to communicate with us. But, there are schools, some schools have more kids and routes than others, so they see more of it than others. And they may feel like it's just my school, and that's not the case. But you're exactly right. There's a need to communicate that. And the same thing with kids in their neighborhood. We a few years ago didn't have any form of a bus app or communication, but we had the same problem. So it was even an issue then. We didn't have anything to tell parents. So this is our attempt. We're certainly looking at improvements across the industry. Every school district, I personally have attended both state conferences and even national conferences, and everyone's saying, okay, how can we get this information? Because everyone has the same dilemma. My parents want to know where their kid is and where the bus is for their kid. Our vendors are working, obviously, because they want to be the solution. They want to be able to win business from different school districts. So they're working on ways, not just to have something that communicates with parents, that becomes more intuitive, because that's what we don't have, is something that kind of automatically can let people know that doesn't require on that human element of somebody, remembering to update it and being able to figure it out in real time. So we're getting closer, but there's still a lot of room for growth. And we'll certainly continue to communicate that with you all as we're making progress in that area. So
Okay, well, I appreciate your comments, and I will just, hopefully in the future, now that you know, parents get very anxious when they can't find their child or put their hands on their child. So, whatever you can do to get information to the school, so that at a minimum, we as board members can say, well, call the school and maybe they can help you during this time of crisis with staffing, to help you locate the bus, your child, whatever's going on in that situation at that moment in time. So I appreciate your comments, and I also understand and appreciate the challenges that we're all facing at this moment in time. Thank you.
thank you, thank you.
Dr. Miller, I see your hand up. Got a question? You're on mute.
I had my hand up before when I was making a comment and you didn't acknowledge me then. So that's why it's still up, but I'll put it down.
No problem. So kind of reading from my notes here, Dr. Fawcett, and we can have some more, Dr. Fawcett and Dr. Saunders, we can have offline conversations about this. Because what I'm hearing is that in the past, some information might have been sent out, but at the same time, during this conversation we're having now, potentially new information is being requested. So perhaps if it's, I'm not sure if I need a motion on this, if you all just agree to it, it might just be able to kind of move through that. But a recommendation I would have is for transportation in general. And this from the action items I have of what I'm hearing us go back and forth about. The transportation department could provide a report to either this committee or the board to just highlight some of the challenges that you're having, again, specific to Prince George's County. It doesn't have to be across the country, but specifically to Prince George's County. Directly targeting our competitive pay. Like you said, we would have to talk to Mr. Hertzman about that, but maybe a breakdown of how our pay compares to neighboring jurisdictions. You highlighted how transporting special needs students and programs are additional costs. You know, what are those costs? How are we handling those costs? You mentioned hiring goals. You mentioned CDL course and things like that. What I'm getting at here are what are the innovative methods that we're proposing to try to accomplish this huge problem? And are we taking it in bits and pieces and milestones? So you say we have 222 routes that are uncovered. Okay, are we saying, okay, by the end of this year, we hope to get it down to 170? Like, how are we working to get that as close to being complete as possible? And I know we're having a lot of good dialogue in this committee about it right now, but I want to make sure that in some way, maybe we can get a more formalized summary from you all, so that again, we can collaboratively come together and say, okay, well, this is where we are. Let's go from here. Because if we don't have something like that, then it's going to be a lot of re-asking the same question, saying, oh, how about you try this? Well, we did that 2 years ago. It didn't work for this, and this reason. So I'm really just trying to get us to a place where we're able to collaborate on the same level and get to a solution. So my recommendation would be for transportation to potentially put together something like that for this committee or the full board, and give it to us when it's ready. And I don't know if I need a motion for that, if it's just gaining additional information. And I don't think there's anyone on that can answer that question for me, actually. So maybe to be safe, I'll make a motion. So I'll put a motion on the floor just for the transportation committee to supply that report so that board members are able to communicate on the same kind of knowledge base as what our great staff is already doing. And I would need either board member LaSalle Fraser or board member Miller, Dr. Miller, to second it, because our other board members are guests. Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Any opposition? Great. All right, so moved. Any other comments from Dr. Fawcett, Dr. Saunders, our guest board members, or our committee members? Perfect. I appreciate your time, gentlemen. As always, thank you, Dr. Saunders, for the very detailed overview of what's happening. Thank you, Dr. Fawcett, for your work, continuing to do this as we try to, again, handle this really, really, large issue we've got going on. Okay, so I'm moving right along to 3.3, the fiscal year 2024 Board of Education operating budget amendment process. Mr. Hertzman, thanks for being so patient with us. The floor is yours.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Harris. So on June 8th, the OBAFA committee voted to accept the administration's recommendations for improving the amendment process used during the Board of Education requested budget. Tonight, we wanted to make some final updates now that we have actual dates for the board meetings and committee meetings. There likely will be a couple of changes that we'll have to make. Next slide, please. So we'll start with, for those that aren't as familiar with, very briefly recapping the process. Then we'll recommend a couple of changes to this committee regarding the calendar to better align with the process, and then open up for discussion and questions to the committee. Next slide, please. All right, so the new process covers the period from the CEO proposing her annual operating budget in early December through the Board of Education actually voting on its annual requested budget in late February. There are 3 interrelated phases in the recommended process during this time. Phase 1 is the questions and answers. Phase 2 is actual Board of Education amendments to the CEO's proposal. And phase 3 is really to finalize that budget. Of course, throughout all of that and through the entire annual budget development process, there is continuous community engagement. Next slide, please. So the CEO will present her proposed budget to the board on December 8th and release the proposed budget book that same day. Then the Board of Education requested budget really begins here where you see that black line on the screen. So the budget office will present to small groups of board members a session on really reading and understanding the budget book. This is especially highly recommended for new members. So we'll have that first session on December 5th. The same evening as the swearing-in ceremony for new members. And then after the CEO presents the budget, we'll have an additional optional session on understanding the budget book that any member is welcome to join if they'd like to. Sessions will also be recorded for use by members that are unable to join. Then we'll also schedule what I call 4x4 meetings, where the CEO, Chief of Staff, Budget Director, and I would meet with smaller groups of board members to discuss the key changes that are included in her budget and answer any initial clarifying questions from board members that we could do more right away rather than waiting for the long question and answer process. These sessions would, of course, also be optional for all board members. Then board members would have nearly 4 weeks to review the budget and submit any questions to administration. Administration would then submit written responses ahead of the budget work sessions. First work session will be on January 26th and is already scheduled, and the second is scheduled for February 2nd. And as in past years, each work session will be followed by a public hearing. Next slide, please. So board members will submit the requests for amendments that they have by February 3rd using the new amendment template. Then here in this next section is where the original plan goes a little haywire when we start to add in the actual meeting dates. So the sequence after that is intended to be once we receive the amendments that are recommended by board members, administration would provide comments to the board member amendment template, and then the OBAFA committee would review the amendment template, inclusive of the administration comments, and determine which of those amendments should be discussed at the budget work session, number 3. Then after that, when we have that list, administration would finalize the amendment documents and format them really in a way to facilitate the Board of Education, the board members' discussion during that work session. And then in that final budget work session number 3, this would be different from the other 2, where it's a lot more asking questions to each division chief as we've done in previous years. This one is really focused on board members discussing amongst themselves the proposed amendments and determining which amendments to include in the Board of Education's requested budget. Because administration will know ahead of time what amendments will be discussed, we'll be able to ensure that the experts in those topics are in the room to answer when called upon for board members any clarifying questions throughout your discussion. But as you can see here, the dates really don't work and the sequencing doesn't quite work with the actual meeting dates. We're hopeful that we have a solution for this that I'll come back to in a couple minutes. Next slide, please. Phase 3, the finalization here really doesn't require any changes. One thing I just want to point out is, as we do every year during the January OBAFA committee meeting, I'll present some minor CEO recommended adjustments to her December proposal. This is really around just correcting some minor things, like if we get more information about state funding, we'd like to include that in this budget if possible. And those tend to be smaller things, like we received $50,000 more from a grant than we expected, or that kind of thing as the information comes up. Then on February 23rd, the Board of Education will adopt its requested budget. Administration will transmit it to the county executive and county council on the following day, and the budget office will finalize the requested budget book. Next slide, please. Just wanted to point out again that there are many opportunities for students, families, employees, labor partners, and other members of the community to provide their opinions and recommendations on the budget. Listed here are, I believe, 11 engagement methods. This is just for the one phase of the budget process we're talking about, the Board of Education requested phase. But there are additional opportunities throughout the budget development cycle. Next slide. So getting back to fixing the sequencing issues in phase 2, we've outlined some recommended changes here, but I think it's actually easier to see it on the next slide if we move on to that one. So if we look at the bottom right here, with the dates highlighted in orange, we're requesting to switch the weeks of the 3rd budget hearing and the February OBAFA committee meeting. If we're able to do this, I think we could fit this in nicely, so allow us for the right sequencing that we talked about. So essentially, we're asking to, if still possible, to change the February OBAFA meeting to February 8th. And the 3rd budget work session and public hearing to February 16th. Then on the next slide, one just final note before questions. The committee, I think I said, did vote on this process on June 8th, but it didn't go to the full board at that time. So if the committee moves favorably today, this plan could go to the full board for approval after that, with the actual final dates in, hopefully. So with that, I'll yield back to the chair.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Hersman. Mia, please keep the slides up for me. Before I turn the floor over for questions from other board members, I want to say thanks. Thank you so much for, again, putting this together. Like you said, we have seen this information before. We coming back with additional dates now just to kind of try to cement stuff. I really, really want to stress to board members that it's important. First of all, we'll make sure to get you these slides, because I know it's a lot of dates, it's a lot of information on these slides. But there are also a lot of avenues for board members as well as the community to plug in to the budget process. And I want to make sure that we are understanding that this budget amendment process was formed as a means to try to hit certain target dates, because it's a fast moving process. And so thank you to Chief Herbstman and Ms. Howe for your work on this. And thank you for the committee for allowing us to come back up again. All right, so Board Member Adam Stafford, I see you have your hand up.
I just had a couple of questions. Could you go down to, I believe it's slide 4 or 5? Oh, maybe we can stop here. So the 4x4 sessions, these are happening prior to the submission of board member amendments. Am I to understand that?
Yes, this is really intended to kind of answer any initial questions that you have, and also just to point out, as we'll do in the CEO's presentation, just we'll highlight some of the key areas that are changing in her proposed budget, but would like to go in a little more detail with board members and answer any questions that you might have about those areas.
So when will there be an opportunity for board members to meet with the administration after they submit an amendment?
So after you submit an amendment, I think we could discuss during the, like, as you're producing the amendments, there's a good amount of time between the CEO presenting on 12/8 through the actual amendment due date, which I'm trying to find in here. So we'd welcome any discussions through that, but we don't have that formally built into the process because I don't think time would allow for that.
So, yeah, so let me jump in really quick. So Board Member Adam Stafford, I think the purpose of the 4x4 is just to again understand the budget as a whole, to say, hey, these are the updates, these are where we see gaps. And then from there, board members form their amendments around that new knowledge, so that board members aren't making amendments around something that is already in the budget. So it's just that it's building that commonality. From there, you make the amendments, and through the amendment process, when you're building that amendment, I think Mr. Herbstman administration are open to having those dialogues while the amendment is being formed. And we didn't put a date in it specifically because we didn't want to tie a date to it. It's supposed to be open and a fluid process, as long as it's before that said deadline. But go ahead, I cut you off a little.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, I think that should be delineated somewhere, because I know that I've had challenges getting just some questions answered specifically around amendments that I've proposed, and having meetings with administration around ideas or budget amendments during that time period. And I think that that's a really crucial component, because then a board member doesn't present an amendment that's way off base. They've had a conversation and really a collaboration has been formed to really think about where it fits. So, I don't know how that can be added in, or if there can be some type of just, note added that, the administration will make every effort to meet at least once with board members that propose amendments to, support them in, finalizing that amendment.
So I think there's a couple places potentially where could work through this. I think if there are amendments that a board member is considering, certainly in the 4x4 sessions, we're happy to discuss those then, but I know that is early in the process. Later in the process, we were trying to give board members as much time as possible to actually submit their amendments and really to develop them. So that is pretty late in the process when they're actually submitting them, and it doesn't really give administration very much time to comment on them. The other thing is we made that deadline purposely after the second work session, so that anything that happens in both the second work session and the second public hearing could help to inform the Board of Education members' amendment request. Once we actually receive your amendments, the timeframe is very, very tight there, even with the scheduling. But there is this built-in question and answer process, and speaking for the administration, we are happy to meet if you have an idea for amendment earlier on, not really at the end of that submission timeline. We'd be happy to meet and discuss with you and try to help to develop the amendment as much as possible.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you so much.
That concludes your question, Board Member Stafford. Cool. All right, Dr. Miller, no question? Oh, it went down.
Oh, no question. I think Mr. Hertzman addressed it when he discussed the timeline that we had to come to the administration to get any kind of clarifications we need. I remember in one of our former meetings, he did propose to do a chart for us, and he presented something along that line tonight. So thank you.
Okay. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. More than a question, what I want to propose is, I'm a very visual person. I think a lot of our board members are as well. Once we go through the approval process by the whole board, I would love to see an infographic of some sort that provides us with a timeline that is very visual for our board members to follow. And that would be so helpful for me, and I'm sure that my board members would appreciate something like that.
That's what I just said.
Absolutely. And we did, I think in an earlier version, when we were doing sample dates still, we did a Gantt chart that actually outlines each step and the dates on it, but we'll have to update that and we could provide that as well.
Yeah, an updated version. Yeah, I saw the first one and I understand that. I just want to make sure that once we finalize it, and it's also very public for our community and residents to see.
Yeah, and in Mr. Hertzman's defense, I did ask him to just provide updates with the actual dates and not visuals until we locked in those dates. So if this passes through this committee and then it passes through the full board, then we can present those visuals and update that Gantt chart accordingly.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right, any other questions from my committee members or guests tonight? Look at that, Mr. Hertzman, you're off the hook. All right.
I did have a clarification.
No, he's not yet. Wait a minute. I just put my hand up.
Okay.
I apologize. I almost forgot my question. Darn.
Did you want to let him go and then we'll come back to you?
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
go ahead, Mr. Hertzman.
Oh, no. It was about that date, those dates. That's what it was.
Okay.
That's what I was gonna.
Where he showed the changes on that, in that section where he showed the changes from 218 to 2, it was in the last group of
Right
dates.
there, that one.
Yeah, let me see. Yeah, that's the one. Let me be clear. You're switching the date for that was originally scheduled for 2/16. You're moving it up to 2/8, and the date that was scheduled for 2/9, you're moving it back to 2/16. That kind of confused me.
Yeah, it is a little confusing here because the idea was that currently the let me say this right. The budget public hearing is on 2/9.
Correct.
And that is not really enough time to receive all of the amendments and 2/3, and actually it doesn't give the OBAFA committee a chance to review them or add additional comments or anything like that. So we're asking to move that to the following week and instead move the OBAFA meeting up to that week. So it's really switching those two dates. The other thing that I think I made it overly confusing here was I switched the days in that week too. So instead of 2/15, I put I made it 2/16 because we typically have the OBAFA committee meetings on Wednesday and the board work sessions were on Thursday. But we're open to, either Wednesday or Thursday of that week, definitely if that fits better.
Well, our last board meeting is on November 10th. We only have one meeting in November. Oh, I apologize. I'm in November, February. We're okay. That's up to the board to make that decision. if they don't mind changing. Dr. Harris, that's your call.
Oh, I don't need to make that decision now though, right?
No, I'm just saying it's your call.
Okay, yeah. Okay, understood. We'll cross that bridge then. Okay, I need to put a motion on the floor to accept the updates meaning the dates being added to the budget amendment process.
So move.
All right, sounds good. I'll second it. No, I made the motion. So you seconded, yes. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. No opposition there. Motion passes. All right, Mr. Harrison, again, you are off the hook. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, let's land this plane. We had a lot of really good discussion here tonight. Thanks for sticking with me. Again, thank you to Mr. Hertzman's team as well as Dr. Fawcett's team for joining us tonight and the very, very in-depth presentations as well as the information. Thank you to my guests, board members for joining us as well as the committee members. Jumping right into 4.0, we have no follow-up items from our September 14th meeting. And looking forward to our next meeting. Our next meeting of OBOF will be Wednesday, November 16th at 5 p.m. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Very good. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. So moved. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you again.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Aye.
See you. Thanks, Mia and team.
Sure. Have a good
See
one.
ya. See you.
We got it. We here.